Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D. Have you ever wanted to go out, way out, and catch monster fish like that? Look at the bend in the rod and go for big bluefin tuna. Or how about striped bass, skipjack, false albies, and more? Well, the guy that you're seeing right there, that is my guest. He is Captain Gene Quigley of Shore Catch Guide Service. Captain Gene, otherwise known as Gino, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great, Matt. It's great to see you as well. It's been a while and good to catch up.
Great to catch up. So, I mean, we should kind of give a little background here. I met you probably 96, 97 on the Salmon River in upstate New York. And back then you had a guide service, Shore Catch, and you used to do a lot of trips for striped bass, false albies. But you have really built this incredible business that many boats, in fact, let me just pull up a picture here. I mean, that's one of your major boats. You go out to the canyons with that boat now.
Yeah, absolutely. We fish anywhere from a mile off the beach to, 100, miles off the beach.
It's incredible. It really is awesome. Hey, Gino, so let's talk. Tell me a little bit about Shore Catch Guide Service. First of all, you're the captain. How long have you been the captain and owner of Shore Catch?
So, as I just mentioned, this year starts our 30th year of operation.
Right.
And it's an interesting story. Short Catch was kind of developed back with myself and another one of my partners, a guy by the name of Jimmy Frida. And at the time, we were really into surf fishing and specifically fly fishing for striped bass, which, while it had been done on our coast, it was not the norm. Today you go up and down the beach, you see guys fly fishing all the time. We take people fly fishing for tuna, but back then it wasn't the norm. And so Jimmy and I saw kind of a niche to start taking people fly fishing off the jetty and off the surf, and it really exploded. And from there, a couple years later, we said, "Hey, let's move into boats and offer both." And today, we're running a five boat operation. We have surf guides on the beach. We have, skiffs. We have bigger boats that go offshore. But really, what we focus on now are two things, and that is really big striped bass. So what we refer to as trophy striped bass, anything over, I would say, 40 pounds,
Mhm.
and on light tackle and or fly tackle. And then additionally, tuna. The tuna have been just really rampant along our coast. We fish for yellowfins, big eyes, bluefins. Um, and so that's really been kind of an interesting thing, especially the last 10 years, because we're catching these big bluefins, not trolling, not on massive rods, but on spin rods.
Mhm.
And so, there's fish now on spin rods being caught over 100 inches, which are, six, 700 pound fish, which is pretty amazing. So, kind of a revelation of shore catch and where we are today. Shore catch was always started with the idea of teaching, educating, showing people kind of the amazing fishery that we have here in the Northeast, and really just sharing the passion and the stoke for our sport.
And Gino, you are located in New Jersey, but you go pretty much from the southern tip of New Jersey all the way. Well, you go out to the canyons, but you go all the way up to the shore of Long Island too, northern New Jersey, off of New York City. So you're chasing fish to put your clients into fish.
Absolutely. The fish that we go after and target are highly migratory. So they move up and down the coast, depending on the season, and we usually intercept them. The striped bass, for example, it just started this last week, and they're in the back bays and in the rivers, and then they'll start coming out along the oceans, and they're in spawn mode. They're heading up the Hudson, the Chesapeake, all these different backwaters to spawn. Um, and so generally our striper season is spring and fall. In the summer, the fish that we're catching in the spring are up off of the coast of like Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New Hampshire. And then in September, October, November, they come back down our coast. but it complements our tuna fishing because as our stripers are kind of leaving, the tuna are starting to show up in our waters and coming up from the Carolinas or coming transatlantic from the Mediterranean and other places there.
And those are the big bluefin tunas because false albies, which are tuna, is later in the season. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, these are the bigger bluefins, yellowfins that we target. The false albacore has always been a staple for us, and that's usually in the fall. So from beginning of September through mid to late October, and that's probably one of the most exciting and fastest fish that you could ever catch on a fly rod.
It's fun. After you asking me to come join you, I did finally get a chance to do it. Not with you. I need to do it with you guys for sure. Hey, I want to bring up your website for a second because you did mention the Shore Catch Guide Service or shorecatch.com. But you mentioned Captain Jim Frieda, who's the second one in your Meet the Guides right there. So we give him a little plug. I remember Jim on the Salmon River, and again, you guys, and just so many. You had just a great team then. And now you've expanded this team as I continue to look at this. As you said, 5 boats. So you're able to really help everybody get onto fish, go for what they want. Talk a little bit about the different areas. I know you briefly talked about it. You have beach, you have nearshore, offshore. Let's explore that just a bit because every one of those is a different fishery.
Yeah, for sure. So, and a lot of this stuff is seasonal. So for example, I'll start with the stuff in the way back, right?
Mhm.
So what we refer to as back bay, tidal water, tidal rivers. We start to fish for those striped bass in those areas in April and then in May. And as the fish start to migrate, they come out along the beach, and that's really more what we refer to as kind of coastal, right? And so whether you're in a boat chasing blitzes of birds and fish on the surface, or standing on the beach or on the jetty, those fish are really accessible from that March, end of March to like May, beginning of June. um, the water temperature dictates a lot.
Okay.
It dictates, these fish and triggers them to kind of move with the bait and continue their migratory path up to the northern part of the New England coast. And so for us in New Jersey, that creates a void for striped bass. While you can still catch some resident striped bass in the summer in those warmer months, things really turn to what we call pelagics, right? Tunas, marlin, dolphin, aka mahi mahi, false albacore, bonita, skipjack, right? All show up in that kind of late spring to early fall period and offer us just a plethora of options, whether it's someone who says, "Hey, we don't want to go out really far. We just want to stay along the beach, but we want that excitement of catching a fork-tailed tuna." Great. So we go after bonita and false albacore along the beaches, or we say, "Hey, I really want to test my spirits and go after tuna," and that's when we would run offshore.
So when you're going for what you said, forktail tuna or mahi mahi, how far off are you going? Is it like a mile out? Is it 5 miles out? How far are you going for a fish like that?
Yeah, so the false albacore can be right on the beach. We're usually fishing about a mile off in the boats. We find that there's more bait patterns, but the false albacore like to congregate around inlets. They
Mhm.
like to congregate on jetties. Now, the mahi are more of a traditional, say, pelagic fish that follow the Gulf Stream.
Okay.
And so, as the warm core eddies start to spin off the Gulf Stream and come into the Hudson Canyon and then some of our what we call our midshore waters, anywhere from 15 to 30 miles, the mahi will take up residence there. And they like to congregate around things like lobster pots, any kind of floating debris. And so targeting mahi becomes so much different than, say, targeting albacore, where you're actually looking for the fish on the surface
Right.
with the false albacore. Yet the mahi, you don't see them until you actually come up to the lobster pot or to the debris and actually cast the fly and see them come out from under it and come to attack.
So you're doing, I know you're doing false albies on the fly, but you're doing, I see it in the picture here, and I'll bring it back up there. You're doing mahi on the fly as well?
We're doing mahi on the fly. We even do tunas on the fly. We've caught yellowfin tunas up to 100 pounds on fly. We've caught bluefin tunas over 100 pounds on the fly. Um, Most of the time, the tunas that we're getting on the fly, what I would call the ideal fun fish,
Yeah.
right? Ones that aren't going to break your back, are those 30 to 50-pound fish.
And so, I mean, I've got to ask the next question, right? For those that are so into fly fishing like myself, so are you using like 12 weight rods? I mean, what kind of rods are you using to handle? Because there's once they blitz, they're going too, right? They're not like just coming right in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, depends on the size of the fish. So, 30 to 50-pound fish, that's 12 to 14 weight. Um, but again, as I mentioned, we've targeted and landed very, very large tunas,
Right.
upwards of 100 and over 100 pounds, and those are 16 weight and beyond. I've had some special rods, 17 weight, 19 weight fly rods, which don't really exist, but I've had them made by certain tackle companies specifically to go out and target these types of fish. Um, but most of the bigger companies now, like Sage and TFO, they're very in tune with pelagics, and so they're offering a 15 and 16 weight rod.
Unbelievable. And these bass that we brought on the screen, I see these have plugs in them. But let me get to another picture here if I can bring it up. There's Jimmy, by the way, on the beach. That is one of the flies you're using to go after big stripers, and there's one in its mouth. That's a ginormous striper.
Yeah, that's one of our top clients, and his name is John. Doctor, he's a doctor. We just refer to him as Doc John, and he's caught multiple striped bass with us, upwards of 48 pounds. He actually had a day a few years back where he got a 44, 46, and 48-pound striper on the fly all in one afternoon. During a storm, all the things aligned. We were coming into a full moon. We had approaching low pressure, all these different things. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process of writing the article up for Tail Magazine, um, because, not to get off course, but
No.
probably my biggest mentor in fly fishing is a gentleman by the name of Bob Popovich. I think everybody in the industry knows who Bobby is. And Bobby is truly a legend, the Babe Ruth of saltwater fly fishing. He recently passed away very tragically this year. And this article was always something that Bobby wanted me to write, and not so much as a how-to, but to tell the story of what happened that day and how it happened. And it was done on one of Bobby's flies, which is Bobby's what he calls his beast fly, which is what he used to imitate the large bunker that are along our shores.
It's incredible. So first of all, this is great. How many articles have you written? Obviously, you're proficient in writing different articles for different magazines. And when is this article possibly going to come out? We're talking, I'm sure, months away at this point, right?
Yeah. We were trying to do something to get it for this spring, but I've wrote thousands of articles for magazines in the last 20 years, and over the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 years, I've kind of just really haven't written that much. I got to a point where you can only write about striped bass and tuna how many times, and started to focus a little bit more on content around photography and video, and just life gets in the way. But this article is kind of an emotional article for me because it was something that Bobby and I had been talking about for a long, long time.
Right.
About, is it possible? Can we go out and catch 50-pound class bass regularly during these bunker runs with this new fly that he had invented years ago called the beast fly, which is just a larger version of his hollow bucktail deceiver type pattern.
Right.
And so, it was a long time coming. And so, writing the article for me now, number one, I'm a little rusty. Number two, just is bringing back a lot of memories. And I want to make sure I do what's right by Bob by encompassing, all the R&D that went into that particular day,
Mhm.
which only lasted for 3 hours when we had that bite, but there were just years of preparation to get to that.
But I mean that 3 hours is are lifelong memories for you and put that picture back up here for the client here as well. I mean, you only get that once in a blue moon, and to be out there during that time is really incredible.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you spend, someone like myself who spends hundreds of days on the water every year, right? To get an opportunity like that only happens, once every couple of years. And we almost didn't go that day because there were a lot of storms coming up the coast. And so we were like, okay, do we want to be out there with thunder and lightning and all this stuff? And we kind of looked at each other and was like, we've everything's aligned. The fish are here. We're coming up on the moon. They're feeding. We think they're going to eat the fly. Let's just go for it. And worst case scenario, we see the storms coming and we just beeline back to the inlet. And the storms came and we sat through them. And as soon as those storms passed, that's when that bite absolutely went bonkers. It went off. So it was pretty unique.
That's truly incredible. All right, so I'm going to roll back here for just a second because you kind of talked about May to October with the mahi mahi, the false albacore. Again, stripers coming in as you get into the latter part of fall because they come back as they're migratory because they come back down to where I am in Virginia, and we'll talk about the very small stripers we get inside. But then you have October, December. Are you then running big fish again beside the bass here?
Yeah. So two things we're doing in the fall. One is the big bass, right? That come through, and they're feeding on those bunker again. But the other is the bluefin tuna, and these bigger what we refer to as giants, and maybe small giants, are right along our beach, and we haven't had a fishery like this as far as I can remember. I mean, we used to have a giant tuna fishery in a place called the Mud Holes about 20 miles off. It was in the summer, but now these massive fish are along our beach, anywhere from 3 to 10 miles off. And so what is referred to now as, they say, jig and pop, which is really casting and jigging with light tackle for tuna, um, has exploded here. It's a new sport, and you're seeing anglers doing things that I never even thought were possible on spin tackle with tuna. The ability to be able to land fish of this magnitude on a spin rod is unbelievable. And 10 years ago, if you would ask me that, or 15 years ago, I said never. It's not going to happen. But the fishery's changing, but then also you've got breakthroughs in tackle, new technology in a lot of these companies that are developing these rods and reels and lines that can handle this stuff.
Mhm.
And the sky's the limit right now.
So when did you start experimenting with spin tackle and these new materials with these light spin rods to give it a shot? I mean, obviously, I guess it's probably a trial and error. I mean, sometimes you hook it to something, the rod breaks, you're like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, we've been going after these fish with spin tackle for over 20 years.
Okay.
And in the beginning, it was all failure, right? We couldn't hook them. We'd see them. We didn't know what to cast at them. We didn't know how to approach them. And again, through learning curves and understanding, how to do things the right way, the wrong way, and getting some breakthroughs in tackle. Braided line was a big thing. We started to have some success. And back then, I could can't count on one hand on the entire eastern seaboard of how many people were actually doing this. And the traditional tuna fishermen, the folks that would go out in the bigger sport fishes to the canyons and stuff, would laugh at us. They're like, what the are you guys trying to do? You know? And it started with jigging. Jigging was always something that we said, okay, hey, we can catch them on jigs. And then the casting stuff, when we started to see these fish along the beach and up on the surface, you can't jig for them when they're chasing fish on the surface. You got to throw a cast into them. And that's when we really started. And it wasn't until like probably the last 10 years that the acceleration curve just went like that.
Right.
You know, it just really ramped up.
Because I think a lot of people who are watching this, when they think of big bluefin tuna, they think of wicked tuna, hours of trolling, fighting with big reels and all that. I mean, you have redefined in a more sporting way, I guess is the way to say it, because I think jigging and popping on the top and, really getting them to react to noise on the top or something flashing from their face is a little bit more exciting than just let's troll at 1.2 knots and see what we can pick up.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a lot of it's perspective and what you're into. And I've always been a firm believer in, people let people fish the way they want to fish.
Sure.
And you've got a lot of boats and captains out there that absolutely love trolling. And make no mistake, trolling for big tuna like this is not luck, right?
Right.
It's an art form, and the guys who do it are really good at it, do it very, very well. But for us, yeah, it's more of a hunt. It's visual. It can be emotionally crazy. I mean, you could be out there all day and you could have feeds for hours and hours and hours, and you could throw hundreds of casts into a feed and not get a single bite. And then all of a sudden, on the thousandth cast, boom, you get hit. And you're throwing the same lure
Mm-hmm.
at the same feeding fish, right? What what's making them all of a sudden just pick your lure out and then just hit it? But to see that excitement and that explosion when you're on the other end of the line versus say when the rod's in the rod holder and it hits and you really don't see it or feel it is the kind of what we're chasing. That's the high that we're chasing is kind of jig and pop type fishermen.
And so, and again, this is going to be November, December when you're doing this. Is that the predominant time?
Yeah, mid October through December. Sometimes it bleeds into early January, but by that time, we're it's cold and the marinas want the boats out of the water. So but we travel, right? So the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is kind of the mecca
Mhm.
for giant fishing, this year had one of the most incredible seasons they've ever had, and a lot of the guys that are fishing up here are going down there and chartering boats or trailering their own boats down there to cast in on that fishery. And so you have guys that are doing this 12 months out of the year, right? If the fish aren't in their backyard, well, they're traveling. And then there's going to come a time where, you go up north to like Cape Cod when we don't have the fish. So, ideally from Massachusetts or New Hampshire all the way down to North Carolina, you could target giant bluefin all year round.
But you stay with your smaller window because you do other species, or do you have some of your guys?
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, listen, we take trips. Like we went down, a bunch of us went down to North Carolina and we fished out of there with a boat, Captain BC, and had an amazing time, right?
Right.
But I'm not chartering in the wintertime, right? I try to spend my time in the winter doing things other than fishing, other passions that I love. I'm really into surfing. I'm into skiing. So I try to, scratch those itches when I'm not fishing. But when you have a fishery that's that good and 7 hours away, I mean, yeah, why not go down?
Why not? For sure. So let's talk about clients that come to you. Let's get a kind of an idea here. So I'm a client. I'm seeing this, and I give you a call. I go onto your website. I get the information, and I really don't know what I want to target. How do you gauge, say, a newbie like me? I mean, I'm an experienced fisherman, but not for your types of fish or waters.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, Matt. I mean, a lot of it is just probing and questions that we'll ask clients of, you know, um, what type of fishing have you done?
Mhm.
What excites you about fishing? What type? Is it fly fishing? Is it casting? Is it trolling? Because we'll take people out to do that as well too if they want to do it.
Right.
Um, I'd say the majority of the time, people come to us with an idea of what they want to do. they've researched the fishery here, or they're let's say you live in Virginia, Matt, but you're going to be spending a week in July on the Jersey Shore with your family on vacation, and you're a fisherman. So first thing you're going to do, you're going to start Googling New Jersey fishing or New Jersey
Right.
fly fishing and see, well, what type of fish are running that type of year, and who are the captains that can take me out, and and then they start calling and say, hey, I really would like to get out. We get people that say, hey, we just want to go for anything, but most of the time it's driven by the time of the year because of that highly migratory species. So if you're coming here in July, I'm going to tell you we're really not going to have much opportunity to go for striped bass because they're just not here.
Right.
But if you'd like to go for mahi or tuna or bonita or something like that, we can customize a trip for you.
Gotcha. And then, like you said, it's whether I want to do spin or fly, or if you want to troll, you can do that as well. So how far in advance should a client start to talk to you, to start to book, to kind of, let's say I am coming up there, July 4th week, which is probably a very busy week for you all.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I can tell you my book is probably 85% full right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on purpose. I always leave, at least 15 to 20% of my time open because weather dictates a lot of things. And you could be coming up for, a week and you want to fish on Saturday and all of a sudden it's blowing 40 knots and we got to cancel. So I got to move you to try to get that trip in. So I have to have open dates to be able to put people in there. And so, to secure a trip, most of the time by this time of year, I'm pretty much full.
Mm-hmm.
I do take some of that 15 to 20%. And if someone calls and I have an open day, I try to slot them in. Now, the other thing is we have other captains that are with Shore Catch that we can, put you out with. And then additionally, there are other captains who, okay, call them competitors, but, friends who have their own charter business that we do a lot of referring to as well.
So it's really a big network. If you can't get somebody out there, then you have a network where you're comfortable, because when you make a recommendation, it's Captain Gene Quigley's reputation on the line at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to send him to somebody that I don't trust,
right.
Or someone that I don't know. And being in the business here for 30 years, I it's small to an extent that I pretty much know everybody. And so, yeah, I mean, there's always an option for somebody to fish up here at the last minute.
So so we're sitting here in April now, and you're booked up pretty much for most of the year. So I really want to contact you about a year in advance is what I'm hearing, or at least 9 months in advance.
Yeah, usually, actually, believe it or not, it happens really fast. So, November, December, January, February is when we really do most of our bookings, right? Because a lot of times we have a very high rate of repeat clientele.
Of course.
So if someone books 3 tuna trips a year, when they're done with those trips, around the holiday season, they'll say, hey, Gino, I want to book 3 more this year, put me in for the same dates, or put me in around the same moon phases, or whatever it is that we kind of decided how we were going to spread their trips out.
And that makes perfect sense. And so now I've booked the trip. What do I need to bring with me? What do I need to fish the Jersey Shore or out on the boat or wherever the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, we provide pretty much everything other than your clothing, right? So we always recommend, you dress appropriate for the time of year that you're coming and the weather, but rods, reels, line, lures, beverages, clothing and food. Sorry, we don't supply food. We'll have some snacks and things like that, but we have big coolers on board. People bring their lunches and things like that, but we're what we refer to as a full service guide service. So, if you want to come and fly fish, we have fly rods from, 8 weight to 19 weight, depending on what you want to do. We have reels that have right hand and or left hand retrieve, just like with the spinning rod too, because we provide top of the line tackle for clients. And we know a lot of people that are traveling to us don't necessarily want to come with gear.
And that makes a lot of sense. And someone like me, I'm left-handed, of course, so I have to be the goofy one and be like, "Hey, Gino, I need the opposite hand reel," and you're like, "Of course you do." So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's 7 of us in the entire world, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so rates and policies, depending on what you're going out for, you have different rates, and maybe you can just explain: is there a deposit and things like that?
Yeah, we always take a deposit. Deposits are, that they'll range depending on the trip, from an inshore trip at 200 to an offshore trip of 500. Um, and we do that, to secure the date and make sure that, the client has a little skin in the game,
Right.
right? Because there are situations where people will say, "Oh, well, I just, my dog got sick and I can't come."
Yeah.
um, we we understand that life gets in the way and that people have families and jobs, so we're very good about rescheduling around issues that come up with people, as long as they call and tell us. And weather as well too, right? We are highly safety oriented, and so if the weather is even questionable, we will we will punt and we will reschedule. And that's for two reasons. One, this could be the only fishing trip that you're taking. We want you to be out there when it's fairly nice and enjoyable. And number two, the ocean is a dangerous place, and anything can happen. And you want to be cautious, and we're liable. And for everybody out there, we have a responsibility to keep safe. That's first and foremost. My responsibility is to keep everybody safe. Second is to make sure they have a good time. Third is to have them catch fish.
And catching fish and have a good time is really, what I want you to be able to put me on fish. But you're right. I want to be safe. I mean, I don't want to be out there if we're in 20-foot rollers. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
No, for sure. For sure. Gino, so back to the fishery real quick here. What can you keep? Because I know, like with striped bass, especially some of the big ones, there are limitations on what you can keep.
Yeah, striped bass is confusing because every state is different. And so there's been a lot of stricter regulations around striped bass and what you can keep, because the fishery is in trouble. And people will argue with you, "Oh, it's not. There's more stripers than anywhere." But and I'm not a scientist, nor do I get really involved in that stuff. But in New Jersey, it's one per guy between 28 and 36 inches, and so it's what we call kind of a slot fish.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean that's actually it's 28 to 33. That's new last year, so it's a very, very small slot that you have to be able to keep a fish. And they do that to protect the spawners in the springtime,
Right.
and also the younger ones, so they can grow.
But you will chase and you will get into the larger fish because it's the trophy fish for the picture, but then you release it right away.
100%. Yeah. And every one of our clients, if I were to ask them, "What do you want to do? Do you want to go get a 28-inch fish for the table, or do you want to go catch a 50-pounder on a topwater lure?" They're going after the 50-pounder on the topwater lure, right? Because, while people do come to catch fish to take home and eat, and that's an awesome thing, most people are sportsmen first. They're there for the experience. They want to catch the fish. They want to, it's not something that they get to do all the time. If you want to take fish home, you can go to ShopRite and buy it, right? Or you can go to a fish market and buy it. So people, and a lot of people say, "No, man, it's going to kill the industry because they can't take fish home." I don't see that really. I think people are sportsmen and out for the experience first, and if they can take a fish home, great.
It's fantastic. Gino, first of all, I want to thank you again for coming on Off the Hook with Matty D. I've known you for a long time. I've admired you from afar. We've had great conversations. I mean, what you've turned Shore Catch into with Jim is incredible. I mean, it really is. And people should follow you on Instagram. It's your pictures, the videos. I see where you're getting your photography from and how it's growing. It looked like you also were incorporating some drone work as well on some of the stuff. It really is awesome, man. Really fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's tough to keep up with these days with content and filming and a lot of the pictures that we take, I'm a photographer, have been, so I do a lot of the pictures, the videos, the good old iPhone, high quality stuff that you can go into CapCut or any one of these little, apps and do it. But we do have, professional videographers that do come out with us from time to time to create content, whether it's for a sponsor that we're working with or, for the state or something like that. And that's always fun to be able to do that.
For sure, for sure. Well, Gino, I want to thank you. I'm going to bring up your website once again. If you want to learn more about Gino, Captain Jim, his entire team, you're thinking of going to New Jersey to go after stripers, false albacore, bonita, big eye tuna, yellowfin tuna, mahi mahi. I'm going to miss a ton, skipjack, you name it, others. Shore Catch Guide Service, shorecatch.com. Easy to find out. You can find out what's fishing and when. Check that out as well. I can vouch for him 100%. One of the nicest and gentlest people I've ever met. And Gino, I'll just put it straight out. Dude, you can fish your ass off. You're incredible. You really are. Fun to be with you as always. So
thanks, Matt. I do really miss those days on the Salmon River with you. I know you've changed and now are more into the steelhead and the browns and go a little bit later, but yep. The times that we had were amazing. And it's interesting as I continue to go there the same week every year. I started bringing my two sons, Patrick and Justin, up there when they were, I think, 7 and 9. They're 26 and 28, and we haven't missed a year since then.
When do you still go up there that last weekish of September kind of a thing?
Yeah. It usually bleeds from the last week of September to the first week of October. Still fish that same hole down there in Douglaston that you and I would fish, and your buddy with the zebra line and the whole deal.
That's fantastic. Gino, great catching up with you. Thank you again so much for joining me today on this episode of Off the Hook with Matty D. Best of luck this year, and not only in the Salmon River, but with Shore Catch Guide Service.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Again, that was Captain Gene Quigley with Shore Catch Guide Service. You can find his website, and I'll bring it up here one more time for you. Again, shorecatch.com. He is just an amazing guy. He's got so much going on, as he talked about there. 5 different boats. He's got a fleet of people on his team, and of course, different types of fish at different types of years. The New Jersey scene is incredible. He has been talking about it to me for years. So again, check it out, Shore Catch Guide Service. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D.